So I'm sure most of you are aware, and probably why you're here, that once someone turns the age of 18, they now become a legal adult. So even though your baby that's been with you your whole life, whether it's a child or a grandchild, still seems like a baby at 18 years old, they're legally not. So once someone reaches that legal age of 18, you no longer, as a parent, can make decisions on their behalf without their permission. So this is where the transition obviously is happening with senior age high school students, transitioning to college, to moving outside of the home, going on to whatever career they want to flourish in. So a lot of parents don't necessarily realize that they need documents in place to actually still be able to act on behalf of that child. With that comes the intent that the child obviously still needs to have that intention that they want that parent or grandparent involved. So you obviously want to have open and honest conversations with that individual to make sure they truly want you still involved in their life. Kind of speaking from real world examples, if your child is the legal age of 18, those parents lose the automatic rights to access medical or financial information. I do have a close friend and colleague who had a child attending college. I believe he was junior in that college specifically, got into a major accident. Parents didn't know about it for 3 days. So knowing how intense that feeling must be as a parent to not even know that your child has been in an accident is huge. So you really want to make sure that you're on that list of people to contact if an emergency happens, God forbid. So colleges, hospitals, and banks are required to protect their own privacy. So even though they might be parents themselves, they want to tell that parent about something that's happened, they don't have the legal authority to do that without those specific documents in place. So it's really important to plan ahead so that families can remain involved during those emergencies. All of the documents, whether it's documents for you, like your will, your trust, your powers of attorney, are great. But powers of attorney for your kids as well are so important because we're planning for these emergencies. We all know what it feels like to be in an emergency situation, that stress level, so trying to get action in place during that time is really difficult. Thinking about some other real life examples, because I know it's hard to picture kind of how this can act in general, but say your child is hospitalized after a sports injury. Are you allowed to talk to the doctor? Are you allowed to be part of that conversation about what treatment looks like? Can the doctor be prescribing pain medications or consenting to a surgery without that parent's involvement? Again, that child is 18 years old. They're able to make decisions on their own, even if they're poor decisions, but you might still want to have kind of that know-with-all about what's going on with your child's health at that time. A college bill is unpaid, whether your child now has a credit card in their name alone that you sent off with them for college. Maybe you opened up their own checking account that you're not a joint owner on, and maybe they're racking up a ton of bills from DoorDash because they're so excited that they're finally on their own. Can you resolve that on their own so that they continue their studies? Or even if they're paying for their own financial purpose at college, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, are they physically responsible for that? How are you involved in that bill paying to make sure they're truly on top of it? They're studying abroad. Maybe they're in Europe and they need help managing a bank issue that's happening in the US. Do you have the legal authority to help them with that? Maybe their credit card began to be declined over there. Do you have the legal ability to talk to the bank about that? So without the right legal documents in place, the answer to this is no. You don't have the ability, the authority to do so without thinking through some of these issues. So we really want to talk about 3 core legal documents, and there are a couple other documents too that we include in our young adult protection plans. First and foremost, at least on the general level, is something called a HIPAA authorization. So this is access to medical information. You all have probably seen it at your primary care doctor. When you're filling out that new registration as a patient, you're asked if you want to provide medical information to any family members or trusted contacts. That's a HIPAA authorization. So that's going to be able to give a medical provider the ability to talk to a person about one's medical information, whether it's information about an upcoming appointment, results from a lab, if someone had an emergency and they were hospitalized. Important to note that this might be the leeway into a child's life with gaining access, because a HIPAA authorization doesn't give a parent or a grandparent the ability to make medical decisions, but it gives them the ability to know about them and to just be involved as far as access to speaking with a doctor. The documents that give you legal authority to make decisions on one's behalf are your powers of attorney. So there's both a healthcare power of attorney, also called a healthcare proxy, and a durable financial power of attorney. So two separate documents. Most people think that they have power of attorney over everything, but not realizing that they actually do need to be two separate documents for those two types of decision making. Your healthcare proxy or power of attorney would give that person, a parent, grandparent, a loved one, the ability to make medical decisions in an emergency. So that's only if that child or person is unable to make those medical decisions for themselves. So again, a nice leeway into this discussion with your children is that if they're of sound mind, if they're able to make their own medical decisions, even if it's a poor one, they're still going to do that. You're not taking away that right for them to act, but you're useful in an emergency that if you needed to act on their behalf, God forbid if they were in a coma, if they were in an accident, if they were in a mental state that they didn't have the cognitive ability to give informed consent, that's when you're going to act as that medical power of attorney for them. So helpful, especially in those emergencies, because if we lack that healthcare power of attorney, you potentially are having to petition a court, which if you live in Rhode Island, it would be a probate court here for a guardianship, which becomes much more stressful, much more costly, as now we're paying attorney's fees, filing fees to the probate court, and it's much more intensive to be within the court system because now you have to divulge all the financial and health information of that child. That now becomes public record. We have to file annual accountings. So a simple document like a healthcare power of attorney or financial power of attorney could really support the need for not needing a guardianship. The second type of power of attorney is your durable financial power of attorney. So this is a not as common document that people have in ordinary life. It's something that you definitely need an attorney to draft versus a healthcare power of attorney, which some medical providers provide for you. A financial power of attorney is going to give that person the authority to handle all financial and legal affairs. They can either be really specific, so it could say, my parent only has the ability to access my bank accounts. They can't do anything else for me financially. Or it can be really general and allow that parent or grandparent to do a lot of things for them. So really stepping into the shoes of that person so that they can act financially. Kind of back to the tune of paying bills, making sure things are happening with their financials. That's going to be the document that's going to give you that access. Any questions so far? Yes.
Yeah, I do. In the case of the healthcare proxy.
Yeah.
So if there is, this is in the setting of an emergency, right?
Yeah.
The person is unable to give consent, the person is unable to make decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who is, as a parent, who do the physicians go to in that situation? Because I thought they always go to the parents.
I know, that's a great question. So I would say the legal world versus real world and the healthcare world is much different. The healthcare world is a much grayer area. Legally and on paper, they cannot speak with you unless they had that legal authorization, either through that power of attorney or through that HIPAA authorization. Some doctors, nurses will understand and might still tell you, but it's kind of up in the air if they actually decide on that. They likely would go to next of kin in that situation, which would be your parents in a child situation, but you wouldn't be able to make actual decision-making powers without a legal document, whether it's a power of attorney or a guardianship designation.
Who makes the decisions in that setting then?
So the healthcare provider would likely require that a guardian is named. So mom and dad or another loved one would have to petition the court to be able to make those decisions, especially if they're more intense decisions, like removing someone from life support. They're definitely going to need that actual legal authority to do so. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
All right. So kind of going into more detail, so we have that HIPAA authorization. So this is going to protect the privacy of medical records. So I'm sure we've all heard about HIPAA laws. So really important that even in emergencies, providers can't share the details without written consent. So kind of to your question, depends who you're seeing. They might do you a solid or do you a favor and give you that information, but really they would be violating HIPAA laws for that reason. This really comes into play, especially, in today's times with mental illness as well. So making sure that we have HIPAA authorizations if we think that, a child or grandchild or loved one might experience signs of substance abuse, mental illness. So wanting to become more heavily involved in that discussion as well is so helpful. And this HIPAA release allows a designated individual to access this information. This HIPAA authorization doesn't have to be for one person, so you can have multiple people. If you want, say, both parents, if we want a grandparent's involvement, or if a sibling was really heavily involved in that medical information, you can add those individuals there. All right, going over again that healthcare proxy. So really ensuring that someone your child trusts can step in. It's so important, especially during those emergencies. I always want to reiterate that the child is the one making these decisions about who to appoint. So even though, as parents, we want to feel very involved, but if your child is being stubborn and maybe trusts dad more than they do mom with medical decisions, that's their prerogative. They certainly can nominate that person over the other. I'm sure all you moms are like, absolutely not. Some other kind of tasks of a durable financial power of attorney. This is so important for you guys to have even as individuals. So not even more so for your children, but also for you too. It's become a document that's really required for you to live and for you to really feel taken care of if you're experiencing a cognitive decline, if you're getting older. So you even want to think about this for yourselves. It can have really specific powers such as filing taxes, registering a car. Some of your kids might be taking a car to school with them. Maybe you need to deal with parking tickets if that's what they're doing on their campus. Or even speaking with government agencies. So being able to speak about student loans or credit against that specific child, making sure that they're still keeping their ship running. Because at the end of the day, we're giving a child a lot of responsibility when they're flying that coop. And you want to make sure that they have the entitlement to do so, but that you're still there protecting them and able to help in a situation. So this isn't just for children who are attending college. Obviously, that's definitely the most frequent thing that we're kind of dealing with because it's the first time that a senior is now moving maybe out of the home, really going to be on their own responsibility level. You definitely want to have this if we're attending college, especially out of state or abroad. In the situation of one of my colleagues, he was a student in a state that was, I believe, on the West Coast. So now tacking on travel time during that 3-day period that they didn't know, it's definitely really helpful to have because there's only so much communication that's going back and forth. You want these documents for any child that's managing their own healthcare or finances, which realistically is likely going to be at the age of 18, assuming that they kind of are on their own and starting to experience a different level of maturity. If a child or grandchild is traveling a lot, participating in internships, or even taking a gap year, this is for anyone over the age of 18 in that specific situation. So all this planning ahead is going to ensure a smooth transition and timely support. Just part of that full package to make them feel totally taken care of. So these conversations, I completely understand, are difficult to start. But having a conversation with that child is going to open the doors for talking about this new responsibility that they're being given. Even myself, when I was 18 years old, I don't think I really understood the breadth that I was physically responsible for myself. I could make every single decision under the sun, even if it was a poor one. So knowing that my parent, my grandparent, my loved one is with me for this and wants to still be involved in my life to be able to gain access is so helpful. You know those people better than I do, such as those children or grandchildren. So whatever conversation makes the most sense. To my earlier point, we want to make sure that it's their decision, so they need to completely understand the documents that they're signing. All of these documents that we're going to talk about in a little bit either have to be notarized or signed in front of two unrelated non-blood witnesses. So obviously there's always that note that you want to make sure that they're truly understanding of the documents. You would be reviewing and signing the core documents, hopefully with a legal professional. So we'll talk a little bit about our packages as far as protection plans. And we want to make sure we're storing copies in an accessible place. So providing that to the college. Maybe if that child is already seeing a nurse or a doctor in the area that they're residing now, providing that doctor specifically with that information. Making sure that both the child has access to it on, a PDF and that you have access to it. A lot of things these days, although you need the original kept in a safe place, most of these can be dealt with a digital copy. So making sure that all of those people have that in place. All right. Just some other additional considerations, because we have some of these included with our young adult protection plan. There's something called a FERPA release, which is kind of similar to a HIPAA waiver in that it's releasing access. So this is giving specifically the child access to academic records with the school. Again, depending on your child's comfort level with that, they might want you to be involved knowing what's going on with their specific academics. Definitely important if they have a scholarship on the line to make sure that they're not going to be in confliction with those requirements. Trust can ensure that your children are taken care of no matter what. So trust is really more so in the realm of you all as parents and grandparents. So ensuring that your assets are considered provided for in a way that are going to protect a legacy, protect those loved ones. Because maybe we don't want that 18-year-old going off to college to gain access to a huge inheritance if something happens. So trust planning can have those age requirements in place to ensure it's not being used in a frivolous manner. We also include for our young adult protection program emergency contact cards. So this is going to be a healthcare wallet card. I'll actually pull one out for you guys because we have a sample. But it basically states they're going to put it in their wallet. So God forbid if someone was in an accident and an EMT is trying to figure out who you are, it's going to have contact information, the agent's name, so whoever the healthcare power of attorney is, address, phone numbers, any other medical information you need specifically on there, like allergies or major conditions, so that that person knows exactly who to contact if it was an emergency. All right. So I do want to talk, before we kind of go into the next segment of the presentation, we've developed a young adult protection plan. So I have some brochures on the table too, but especially my boss, Samantha, she has 4 children, so she completely understands this stress of wanting to be feeling as if you're protecting your loved ones the most, especially those young children. So we've developed 2 kinds of plans for our families that really want to ensure that protection for that young adult. So we have 2 separate options depending on how much involvement you want, and I'll leave the screen up when we go into the next discussion as well too. So option 1 is a self-completion package. So this is us providing you with all of the documentation. We're just handing it over to you for you to fill out with the information such as children's names, names of specific individuals and agents, as well as you're responsible for getting them notarized, witnessed, whatever the case may be. If you're wanting a more enhanced experience, so having us sit down with that child and really explaining the legal documentation behind them, we would be filling out the documents for you on your behalf. Most of my office are notaries, so we'd be able to notarize the documents for you, witness them appropriately, put them together for you in a nice clear folder, and we would also include that wallet card for your young adult. So we have 2 different pricing options. We also have a QR code for our free estate planning tool, so if anyone's kind of interested in looking into estate planning for themselves too, feel free to download. And then we're doing kind of a special today too when it comes to the protection plan. We're going to talk about if we want to do any signups towards the end of the presentation, but we have a little bit of a discount too. Any questions? Yeah.
If you went with option 1, do you still get a wallet card, or would you be able to if you paid a little extra?
Sure, I'm sure Caitlin and I can discuss. Yeah, I probably should. So with both of these, you're getting financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, HIPAA waiver, and the FERPA authorization. So all of those documents are included in both of those packages too. So all of the documents that you need in that scenario. Any other questions?
So in a situation where they are in a hospital, who knows where, how will the physicians there know that we do have health a power of attorney?
Great
For the
question.
health cap.
So that's where it's really important of where you're storing them. So even in that situation, especially if a child is living on campus, giving it to their, whether it's the finance department for your financial power of attorney, and then there's a health department too. So you can actually send prior medical records to like the nurse's station really and keep a copy of that, because most likely if a child is in trouble, they'll be contacting the school. So the school would have that information too. Yeah. And then if any child is seeing like a specialist in the area that they're now going to school, providing it to them as well too. But in most situations, it's an emergency, so it would mainly be the school involved.
Okay. And how about, will we talk to their bank or
Yeah.
whoever, we just email them a copy? Is
Yeah.
that how it works?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most banks, depending on if it's like a local branch versus a bigger bank like Bank of America, if it's a bigger bank, you'll need to physically go in person to show them that. Some of them have to run it through legal department just to make sure it's accessible, but otherwise, if you have a relationship with a banker, you can certainly email it to them too.
Okay.
Great questions. Any other questions before we go to part 2? All right, sounds good. Feel free to take the floor.
Well, thanks. And I'll stand here just for all of you.
There we go.
All right, so I know there's a couple of people that are familiar with the College Planning Center and our services, but anybody who's not, right? So you've been through it, so you can attest to this entire process. But for those of you who are not familiar, I'm Courtney. College Planning Center is just a free service that helps with this whole process of how to pay, where to borrow, how to refinance, thinking about, we'll bring it full circle with the FERPA piece and the health insurance at the end. But again, there's so many questions and there's such a disconnect because the colleges are talking directly to the students, even if they're not 18. So you're only getting what they're telling you, which is, as we know, is usually minimal. So there is a bunch of information too that you're more than welcome to grab at the end, but I don't want to overwhelm you if you don't need all of it or aren't ready or whatever have you. But I will be going over everything, so I don't have the formal presentation because I figured it was a nice small cozy group, so we'll get through it. Everybody for the most part has seniors going off to college for the first time or has gone through it before. No, how about you guys? Do you have any students going? Yes?
No, I'm just here to delivery.
And to try the Rhode Island pizza, which I don't think we've done yet, but I feel like that's a necessity. So anyway, like I said, you guys are going off, right? We see the bills, we've already been through the FAFSA, which from there we've learned, getting the code again from the student, everything is directly through them, so that's always fun, having them be responsible for a portion of it. And then I'm assuming everybody has already made their decision because May 1st has passed, so congratulations. As hopefully you can breathe a little bit now, but get through graduations or proms, and right when you're cozy and relaxed is when they hit you with the bill. So we want to make sure that you understand all of the pieces before just kind of signing, because at some point you get so overwhelmed and so frustrated, you just go with things that you did when you were going off to college and familiar names like, oh, we know Sally Mae, national lender. We're going to do it. We know they've been around forever, but we're not doing all of our due diligence, finding all the real information. So when the award letters came in, everybody received those of you who have seniors. I just want to make sure that you understood everything on there, making sure it should have the costs, direct costs for the college and the indirect costs. So when the bill comes, they're only going to bill you for those direct costs. But when you see it on paper, they're going to have the entire amount. And then you'll know it's not going to cost you $2,000 to get to URI from North Kingston. So you don't have to use those indirect costs. But some of them are on there just to get an idea of how much books are going to cost so that you're planning the entire process, not just, let's not buy a car and just be able to afford the car and forget about the gas and the insurance and the tires. So I'm going to make sure, again, that you're taking the whole piece into consideration. But on those awards, if they listed work study, it will come off of what they say you have to pay. But that is not money that actually gets sent to the school. That means your student is allowed to get a job on campus. They work that job like any other job. They get a paycheck. And they very rarely, if ever, walk that paycheck down to the bursar's office to pay the bill. So when you see that in the award letter, pretend it's not there, because you're not really going to get that money. Let's be honest. It's going to go towards the pizza and the DoorDash. Hopefully something, we'll see. So there's that piece. They also will have the subsidized and unsubsidized loan listed. Some people might only get the unsubsidized loan, but it maxes out at $5,500 for seniors. Well, incoming freshmen. That is the only loan they can take on their own without a cosigner. And I'm sure everybody knows that college costs a little bit more than $5,500. So at that point, they typically need a cosigner. The maximum breakdown, if it's subsidized and unsubsidized, is $3,500 subsidized, meaning it's not accruing interest while they're in school, and $2,000 will always be unsubsidized, so it will accrue interest. Unfortunately, it is a backwards process in the sense that you had to make your decision on where they're going to school, and the rates for the loans haven't even been set yet. So that's why you're here today, because we don't know, you made decisions hoping that everything falls into place, and it will. But again, we're still waiting for the numbers. We are having at the College Planning Center right in Chapel View next to Cold Stone Creamery. Next Thursday, we are hoping the rates are out by then. So if you come visit between 10 and 4, even if you don't have real questions, you can pop in because then you get a free coupon for a Cold Stone ice cream. So hopefully it's nice out and you can get some ice cream and maybe get some rates.
Sorry, when is that?
That is, would you say where?
No,
Yeah.
wait, when?
Next Thursday,
Next week.
May 15th,
Oh.
from 10 to 4.
Do you want me to pass one down?
Sure, you guys can, anybody want one, grab one. Like I said, they'll be here as well. Yes?
Can I ask a question on the $5,500 federal loan? You said the $3,500 is,
Is eligible to be subsidized.
okay,
That is gonna be up to the government and the school whether or not it is. So
Okay.
on the award letter, you'll be able to see the portion, if it's subsidized or unsubsidized.
I remember seeing that. Anyway, I'll follow.
It should be on there. If it's not on there, you're still able to borrow it. Some schools don't list it because if it's unsubsidized and it accrues the interest, they just figure, oh, you'll figure that out later. They don't consider it part of financial aid.
Okay.
Most, at least the public schools usually always list it because they want to show you that it's more affordable. Which again, not everybody realizes it's a loan when they're signing off, so make sure you see that portion. And then others will only list maybe the $3,500, not the other $2,000, but you are always eligible for $5,500 as a freshman.
And the $5,500 is, as parents, we don't have to co-sign that?
You do not. So usually you'll take that one first.
Okay.
It builds their credit,
Yep.
gives them some stake in the game. They don't pay it off till after they graduate, or don't have to. And yes, no cosigner required.
And what about, are there any prepayment penalties on it?
Never. They will take your money anytime. Not a problem. Not any of the loans offered to anybody. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. And sometimes they're straying away from it, thankfully, but they used to add the Parent Plus loan, but they wouldn't say parent, they'd just say plus loan, or sometimes they would say Parent Plus without the word loan. And again, you'd sign off and you didn't realize, what do you mean I'm taking a loan? And it's not always the best interest rate.
It was so confusing. When my daughter
Right?
said to me, oh, we have these federal loans that are gonna come on at some point, I said, no, we did RISLA, and they said, no, there's the other one, the FAFSA. I said, no, FAFSA is financial aid, it's got the word free and the word aid right in it.
Right.
I'm like, I said, I thought that was aid, meaning like support, help. Yeah.
So now, right, so now they, they cover,
With my first daughter, I literally did not know that she was taking on a loan without me, like, we didn't know.
and that's why we're trying to fill that gap by being the voice that, kind of, because high school, once you end, everything happens, and like I said, they communicate over the summer, they're not in school, they're not getting reminders. You've already signed all the documents, so you feel like, all right, we're good until they move in, and then little pieces fall through the cracks. Same with the free CCRI. A lot of students will go and then get a bill, and they're like, why do I have a bill? It's free the first year. But you didn't do everything on the checklist. You didn't do the FAFSA, you didn't send your transcript. Sometimes they add on their portal information that the schools are looking for from the students. And the students don't check the portals, they don't read emails. So I do recommend getting all of your students' logins and checking the emails. So that's one way, so you can always access them. And that part doesn't require the form, that just requires you convincing your child to give it to you, which can sometimes be fun conversations. But on the other end, like Daphne was talking about with the FERPA, or even with the loans, as far as like a husband-wife pair or, partners, they also can't talk to the lenders. So if you're borrowing a loan and, the father co-signs and the mother's the one that's really, making all the phone calls and doing the things and trying to find the answers, they won't talk to that mother. Even though it's like, but it's my child, I have the address, I have all the information, I know the social security number. They still won't talk to you unless you fill out what's at that point called the third-party authorization. So just making sure everybody's filling out the right forms to have the conversation. And like I said, for the college level, it doesn't even matter if they're 18. So even if they're 17 and they're going off, they still won't talk to you about the bill and health insurance, which we'll kind of touch on now too. Even though on the award letter, they list the costs, indirect and direct, they do not list health insurance. After you get the bill, they will then, maybe there's a $1,500 difference of what you expected to pay, and you did your diligence on the numbers and you knew exactly what was supposed to come out. And then there's this extra charge. Usually they add health insurance. The college, it's mandatory that students have health insurance when they go off to college. Colleges just assume that you don't. So they automatically charge you almost $3,000, so $1,500 per semester for this health insurance that you probably already have. And we all know double health insurance is not gonna get you double assistance, right? But again, somewhere in the fine print of all this stuff that's gonna get thrown at you, it says it. But nobody ever gets through that because it's too overwhelming. So that's why I like to point out the important tricky pieces. Yep, so it doesn't happen URI, I believe it's July 7th. This is the first day you can go on the website. And you just, the easiest way is in the search bar, just hit health insurance waiver. You type that in, and then it will come out, and then you just have to put in the group ID to prove that you have health insurance, and it will come off the bill. So if the summer, just gets away from you and you forget, when the actual bill comes, double check, the items just to make sure they're not charging you for that, and then say, oops, forgot to do the waiver, and then go online and do it. They will charge you a health service fee of a couple of $100s. That just means they can use the facilities on campus. So that is legit and okay. But like I said, the health service, health insurance, I think is a little sneaky, but that's one big one. Again, understanding that subsidized and unsubsidized, that it is a loan, and then the work study for removing. So, any questions on award letters? I know some of you got them already. We're pretty good. Everybody understood it. They're starting to kind of make it a little more user-friendly. Sorry, camera. I don't know what I'm going to look like. Okay. So now, once you figure out what you're going to need to pay, the recommendation is to borrow for the full year, not per semester. It doesn't actually start accruing interest until it's been dispersed. So the first semester is going to get dispersed, obviously first, and hopefully the student loves it and stays, and then the second semester. So once the first semester is dispersed, interest starts just on that portion. Second semester gets dispersed, then the interest starts on that portion. So you're not going to save money by doing two separate loans. What is going to happen, you're going to take double hits on your credit, and we don't want to do that. If you borrow, sometimes you might work in some of those indirect costs just to have some fluff space in case you might want to buy a new laptop or, some books or things for the dorm room. They have some fancy stuff going on nowadays. So if you need a little fluff, you can always increase the loan a little bit, and then the school takes all the money they need. They eventually write you a check for the excess. Although you have to sign how you want them to send it. Do you want them to give it to the student, or do you want them to send it home? I recommend you have them send it home. If you then choose to put it on the student's card, that's fine. But if you borrow too much and say, okay, we didn't really need this, we were just nervous, you just pay the loan off early, and it wouldn't have accrued any interest at that point anyway. So you'd be safe there. If you under budget and borrow too little, and then scramble and can't come up with the extra 1,000 or 2,000, they will make you do an entire new loan process, and then you get a second hit on your credit. So you're always better off buying too much, borrowing too much, than too little, and they hold that for 90 days anyway before they even start accruing interest or do another credit check. So if in 90 days you decide, oh shoot, I was wrong, I do need, 2 extra thousand, you can call them, and they will do it without checking your credit, but after 90 days, you get a double hit. So, over budget instead of under.
You're not talking about above the 5,500, correct?
Say that again. So the 5,500 is going to come off. So let's say the school costs $30,000.
Okay,
And they only give you the loan, so they take off $5,500. So now we're down to $24,500.
okay, that's the part you're talking about. Okay,
Yes, so
sure.
that 24,500. So some people, they'll allow you to own payment plans with the school. So if we're borrowing 24,000, that's roughly 2,400 a month for 10 months, which is a mortgage payment and not usually the most cost effective or not usually something any of us can really do. So that's where the loans come in. And you can do combinations of loans. You can decide we're going to pay some in cash. And some people will say, all right, we know we're going to pay $10,000 a year, 5 per semester. You could pay $5,000 each time, or you go on a payment plan with the school for that $10,000 and just pay $100 a month. So you're still keeping it in your bank during that time. It's accruing its interest versus the one shot per semester. And then you could take a loan for the other half if you so choose. Like I said, the student will need a cosigner. The loans that are available are dependent on the cosigner's income and credit and debt to income ratio. So depending on where you fall there determines kind of which loan you go at. So next week, hopefully, we will know the rates of all of them. Because at this point, as much as we might love one person over here, but the numbers are better here. Numbers drive this entire process. So whoever has the lowest rates, that's who we go with. We want to make sure they're fixed rates, not variable. So we don't want them to surprise us with a change. RISLA, that is our parent organization. They historically have had the best rates. They're also the hardest to get. I think easy to work with, but you have 8 with us, so you can talk to that.
Yeah, the application process is really easy to get through, and the children really know what they're signing up for with this. Like it's the amortization schedule. I don't even know if they really do that, but they just say this is going to be your payment. This is when it's going to start. This is going to be your rate, and this is how much you're going to pay. It's very simple.
And they do have people that actually answer the phone and answer all of your questions. And if you're stuck and say this format is too scary, I need help, they will help fill out the application on the phone, depending on where your credit score lies. So they require a 680 credit score or above of the cosigner and a household income of 40,000 and above. And then at that point, it does the debt to income ratio. On their website, once the rates are set, I do have brochures kind of explaining the different options and last year's rates, so you can kind of get a feel if you want to look at those. So I think the rates are going to stay fairly similar, but they do have a sliding scale based on your credit score. So if you have a 680, which is the bare minimum, then you'll probably be at the higher end of the interest. Whereas if you have, a higher credit score, there'll be less documents that you need to submit to them. Because sometimes they might ask you for a pay stub or a bank statement. I think those are probably the most popular too. Maybe a W-2 if you have a new job, they have to make sure that you've been employed for a certain amount of time. But everything, so
They're up.
they're up. I know. So we're, like I said, I'm hoping next week we will see what happens. Because the numbers, again, it's an investment, right? But the biggest one since your mortgage, let's be honest. But it's worth it, and somehow we got 8 and still smiling. So Kate's doing okay. The rest of us will do okay too.
Yes.
And when for RISLA, if you decide this route, but they will allow you a pre-approval that does not hit your credit. So you can go on, like in the case of spouses, you can both go on, see if you get approved, and see who gets a better rate. And that lucky winner gets to be the cosigner. And then they'll tell you also they have the different options if you want to pay while they're in school or if you want to pay while they're out of school. So paying in school always gets a lower interest rate, but sometimes it's just not another expense we can take on. So we want to wait until they get out of school and can take it over themselves. But before you choose immediate repayment or deferred repayment, they will tell you what those monthly payments would be for both. So you don't have to make that decision until after. So you can get your pre-approval, see what the numbers are, step away from the computer, process it, and then usually by the end of July is when you want to do the loan application. So you do have some time, like I said, to take this all in. You can wait until the bill comes if you'd like. Some people will do that just so that your numbers are exact. Just again, make sure health insurance is not on there and that you double it, so it's the 2 semesters. Or if you just want it under your life and you are getting too stressed, like I said, just kind of over budget slightly, just in case there's any surprises at the back end. And then you can always lower it or pay it back there. They also offer, it's the parent-only loan, which I personally don't understand why anybody would take it, because if you see the comparison, the parent-only loan just doesn't have the student's name on it, but you still have to pay it while the student's in school, and it's almost 1.5% interest higher, just by not having the student's name on it. Like I said, I think numbers drive it, and I would rather pay, even if I don't want my child to pay, and this is my gift to them, I still don't want to pay more. So I would go with their name on it, and that's nice. But they do offer this because some parents just really don't want their kids' names on it. I used to believe that if the parent passed away, this loan would go with them. It does not. So, because I was actually saying that was the only way I could justify it, is if, God forbid, a parent were sick and something were to happen, then maybe you do this to save your student from having the burden of a loan, but that is not true. So student loans get put into the estate, and then
So there's really no reason.
there's no reason. So yeah, so I was trying, like for years I was justifying it, and I was like, this is kind of depressing, but I'm calling it the debt loan, and then I found out that that is not true, and I'm like, I've been lying all this time, but it still makes no sense to take it. Again, my perspective, but
You should
I feel like
Stephanie, she would have explained that, right?
I didn't know at the time, but now I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an interesting learning experience for me too, and I've been doing this for 25 years. So go figure. So RISLA. Let me back up. A lot of times we'll think about, all right, where are we going to get a loan? We'll go through our bank. Citizens Bank is the only one I'm fully aware of that does student loans. They have a full department set aside for that. Back, I want to say it was 2015, but my dates are wrong. There was the Sunshine Act. It was kind of like the housing crisis. That same thing happened with student loans. Everybody was just lending. Everybody was defaulting. People were getting in a really big bind. It was a process. At that point, the government stepped in and said, that's it. No more kickbacks for lenders because people were paying the colleges to recommend them. So now when you talk to the college, they will give you a list of every lender that has ever been used at their institution in alphabetical order. Overwhelming. It's like you go to the store, sometimes you're like, just give me 2 options. It's an apple. Why are there 20 versions? I just want one. And then you sit there, and if I close my eyes, I would be just as satisfied. But so again, sometimes too much is overwhelming. So I like to kind of do the tops and the bottoms, and then there's a lot in between. So Citizens Bank has theirs. Their requirements are pretty similar to RISLA, but you can always, I always encourage you to do kind of comparisons just to see what works. And if you find something better, please tell me, because then I want to tell everybody else. But RISLA, because that's all they do, they tend to have the best rates just by living in Rhode Island or going to a Rhode Island institution. Students are allowed to borrow, again, if their cosigner meets that criteria. Cosigner does not have to be a parent. If you have a really nice relative or next door neighbor, maybe stranger things have happened. But again, if it's 679, they just won't take it on. So they're kind of the hardest and usually the best rates. The Parent Plus loan is the federal option, which is in the parent's name only. So that's not a cosigner situation. The payments are automatically deferred till after the student graduates or stops going to school. They typically have, I think their interest rate is capped at 10.5, which is high, and a lot higher than these rates are going to be. And they charge a 4.22% origination fee just for borrowing that loan. That's the one I consider the catch-all loan. If you're in a bind, especially during COVID, everybody was just shocked at how their, professional life changed or what happened. Suddenly a lot of people were claiming bankruptcy or didn't have the numbers, or the credit score went down through no fault of anybody's, but then they couldn't get that loan for another year. So Parent Plus loan is kind of that catch-all. They don't go off of your credit or your income. It's kind of chances are pretty good you get that one. So again, if something happens and you're afraid you can't get one of the other ones, still there, but I would encourage you to try to fix the credit score or do something so that you're not stuck with that one for the next couple of years or your next child. So a lot of this information almost becomes an eye-opener, things you didn't even realize. I had some students, I was working in a high school, didn't know they weren't documented, because as far as they know, they've been here their entire life. They have been here since babies, they don't remember anything other than it, and then it comes time for the FAFSA, and they put in their social security number of what they think it is, and nope, you don't match. I'm like, what do you mean? And then their entire process gets changed. There are answers to those questions too, if anybody knows anybody, send them our way. But
RISLA's not for, out of state?
nope, oh,
It is?
sorry. You can borrow up for out-of-state schools. I'm saying just by being a Rhode Island resident, you qualify to borrow through RISLA
Right, so you
for
have
any
to,
school.
but you have to be a Rhode Island resident to get RISLA?
Yes, oh, well, not anymore. To get those rates, they're called the Rhode Island Advantage rates.
Oh,
They do have other rates available if you're out of state and going to an out-of-state school. But if you're out of state and going to URI, you can borrow RISLA at the Rhode Island rates.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Did that answer it?
Yeah.
Awesome. And for international schools, they only do it for the schools that accept the FAFSA, which is no longer everybody. So, there's that. Let's see. PAM plans, loans, cosigner, plus we talked about, oh, the other thing is if somebody gets denied for the Parent Plus loan, the student is then eligible to borrow an extra $4,000 in an unsubsidized loan. So that $5,500 now jumps up to $9,500, which usually works for Rhode Island College for students that get the Pell Grant and don't live there. That extra $4,000 kind of covers the rest of the cost. So again, it buys you some time. Or that's when the hard conversations come and I have to be the bad guy telling the students, I'm sorry, you can't afford the school that you wanted to go to, and CCRA is a fantastic option. It is free. So sometimes we'll make it work for them too. I don't. I just, again, smart borrowing, and sometimes that works. Let's see. Oh, when you're applying for loans too, you also have to make sure your credit is not frozen. I know with all the identity theft and whatnot, people were putting credit freezes on. So you can lift the freeze, apply for the loan, and then put the freeze right back on. But because they have to check your credit score, you do have to unfreeze it. What else? Oh yeah, open house. Oh, and scholarships. Some of you probably already know, but for those of you who don't, there is a monthly drawing for $2,000, and they pick 4 names every month, and all you have to do is submit the name. 30 seconds of life. Parent and student can do it. So,
Take it.
yep, take these. So everybody takes some of these, pass them down, give them to friends.
You send me plenty of emails reminding me.
What's that? Yeah. Oh yeah, once you register once, it will then send you a reminder email. And in the parents, it says, type in your student's email, so we'll go tell them too. And then they also remind the student. But let's be honest, if you're not guaranteed that the kid's gonna do it, you know their information too.
Right. Can I sign up for my existing ones?
Existing loans, or are they still in school?
Existing loans.
Good question. I don't know.
How do we know?
But you know, you can try it. Definitely try it.
Kids try it. I don't know.
And the other things I know, I think we're, right? I don't have my watch on anymore. We're okay with time? You guys doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And I already forgot, what did it say? Scholarships we talked about, loans. Oh, refinancing. In the past, being last year, we didn't encourage you to refinance a loan until after the student graduated, because that loan, originally being a student loan, then became a refinance loan, which changes the parameters of the loan, and you lose all of the benefits of the student as far as deferment and what have you. So if you refinance, you had to start paying right away. Now, RISLA, for the first time, has changed that they will let you refinance all along the way. So if last year's rates are higher than this year's rates and you decide to refinance, you can get the lower rate. If there was 1 year you had to get the Parent Plus loan, you can now refinance that in for another lower rate. So you can bring it down. So at any point throughout, you're able to kind of refinance and go through that process. And they have a whole department set up just for that portion.